When you reach the end of the year, it's nice to take a second to look backwards and think about all that you have achieved in the last 12 months. Maybe you had a really good year at work and got that promotion you deserved. Maybe you trained and ran a marathon. I didn't do anything like that. What I did achieve though was 19 shiny platinum trophies, which is just as impressive, I'm sure you'll agree. 2023 was a hell of a year for games, and I spent a lot of time playing some incredible titles, so I thought, why not, in the spirit of this time of year, rank them and tell you about the best 10 platinums I earned this year, starting with number 10, The Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie. 2023 was a pretty JRPG heavy year for me, and one of my favourite series that I play is the Trails or Kiseki series. In August 2023, I spent around 100 hours in Falcom's latest Western release in the series, and came away enjoying it, but feeling like it was lacking when compared with the rest of the games in the series. I did like what it tried to do with its story, having 3 protagonists that you switch between as the narrative progresses, and eventually seeing this tale come together, but I feel like it would have been so much more successful if Lloyd's and Reen's routes didn't just feel like retreads of the journeys they'd already been through throughout the Crossbell and Cold Steel arcs of the Kiseki story. The third protagonist, C, had a much more interesting route though, and I enjoyed the new characters that it introduced a lot. The attempt of trying to be a group that plays more on the anti-hero side of things compared to Trail's usual paragons was a refreshing change. By the end of the game though, the size of the cast was insane, and tried to invoke an almost Avengers movie-like feel of having so many important and powerful characters available to you in your party. I feel like it speaks to the strength of the Kiseki series that almost all of the characters that you can choose from have their own backstories, motivations and goals that have all been fully fleshed out over the previous 10 games. Most of the trophies in this game weren't too bad, pretty standard JRPG stuff, except for one annoying trophy, which was to do 1,500 random battles. This was such an unnecessary amount of grinding in the endgame repeatable dungeon that it actually soured the experience at the end of the game for me, and by the time that I had actually earned the last trophy, I was kind of grateful to see the back of the game. Despite all of this though, I am still really excited for Trails Through Daybreak next year, and can't wait to return to Zemuria. Number 9. Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 was a late addition for me to this list. Lured in by the prospect that a game that had launched so badly I lost any interest in had been fixed, and being pleasantly surprised that it was, in fact, pretty good. I found myself particularly enjoying just traversing and exploring the world the game was set in, and it meant that I had a great time in the nearly 100 hours I spent in it. I thought that V and Johnny's story was actually a really well told one, with some especially thought-provoking scenes or ideas broached in both its side content and main story. I enjoyed almost all of the game's cast of side characters and their particular side stories, and I felt the way that some of these tied into the endings was actually really cool. The gameplay is fun, and the way that you can build your character to focus on different skills or gameplay styles was really cool, with each option feeling just as fun and viable as the others. From a hack-and-slash ninja to a stealth-focused hacker, it was easy to keep things fresh by just approaching each mission differently and seeing what options the game let you have. I just wish the trophies had been more fun or interesting to earn, or that there had been less of the NCPD side missions that filled the world map. This is one of those games where I felt the trophy list actively took away from my opinion of the game, which is a real shame. Even if I have issues with the repetitive side content though, it doesn't take away from how much I enjoyed the main story as a whole, and how much I remember my time in Night City, and I'm planning to book a return trip there soon to play Phantom Liberty. Number 8.
Persona 5 Tactica.
Persona 5 Tactica was a game that I knew I would enjoy, but was still surprised by quite how much I did. The Phantom Thieves jump from JRPG to SRPG was a fun journey, and although the cover-focused gameplay was quite simple, its use of chaining turns by exploiting weaknesses or lack of cover turned each fight into a small puzzle that I loved to try and solve. I had issues with the characterizations of the returning characters, but still found myself drawn into the story of Erina and Toshiro and their tale of rebellion. The trophies were all pretty easy to get, and even having to do 2 playthroughs still only took me around 40 hours to earn the platinum, even though earning all the cash to fuse all the personas involved some grinding towards the end. The biggest problem I had while playing it was not really enjoying the art direction of the title, and I found that its chibi characters were a bit jarring in the visual novel style cutscenes. I did think the style worked really well in the combat sections though, so I can appreciate the stylistic consistency. It just felt a bit of a step backwards when Persona 5 was such a stylish and good looking game when it released. I would definitely be interested if this style of gameplay became its own spin-off series, the same way that Persona Q did, and I could see myself playing a game like this with the cast of Persona 3 or 4. Number 7. Final Fantasy Theatre Rhythm Final Bar Line. The absolute mouthful that is Theatre Rhythm Final Bar Line was actually my first platinum of 2023, which I didn't earn until March. As a long-time Final Fantasy fan, one of my favourite things about the games is their music. I listen to the OSTs for the series almost every week, and I also have a soft spot for rhythm games ever since I played GuitarMan on the PS2 back in 2002, so Theatre Rhythm was a great joining of two things that I love. The gameplay itself is pretty simple. You either press buttons in time with the circles on the screen, or hold them while moving the analog stick up and down to match a note that plays as it wavers its way along the background. It's nothing groundbreaking at all for a rhythm game, but because of the music that was playing, I adored it, and at the harder difficulties it was quite easy to get overwhelmed by the timings and combined button presses. The graphical style is a bit strange, but I did like that the characters looked and moved like cardboard cutouts on a small stage, and I thought this was really cute. It's also fun to switch between different characters and abilities to do the secondary goals that each level has, like beating a boss in a certain amount of time or collecting a certain number of chests. Once you have leveled the characters enough though, you can just brute force your way through most of these. The multiplayer was also really enjoyable, even though I was pretty terrible at it. Overall, I found this game to be just a really cute, relaxing game that I only spent about 40 hours with, but every one of those hours was a blast. None of the trophies were particularly grindy in my opinion, and because the songs were so short, it's easy to just do a couple at a time without it getting repetitive. Number 6. Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 is a good game, with a cool story and fun gameplay, but it's let down by its boring, repetitive side quests that fill its open world. When I was playing through the main story, I couldn't wait to get to the next cutscene, the next boss fight, to see what was going to happen and where Peter and Miles' adventure was going to take them. But when that was over and the dust had settled, the game lost a lot of its luster. There is some really good side content here, but every good side story is equalled by a shallow gameplay segment. I am still really excited about the next game's story as it promises to have villains I love in it, but I hope that there is a bit more interesting variety in the side quests and an improvement on the stealth mechanics to match this story. I don't want to spend minutes chasing robot birds around the city 20 times to get one cool character reference at the end of it for the third game in a row. Despite all of my gripes about side content design though, Spider-Man 2 feels great to actually play it. The combat is exciting and smooth, and swinging around New York was a blast. There is a lot that I would like to see improved upon in the next game, but the traversal itself is already perfect, and I think at the end of the day I just want the game to try and be greater as their tagline promises. Thankfully, even though you need to do everything in the open world, it never felt quite as repetitive as Cyberpunk did, so the trophy list was a lot more fun to earn and didn't feel like it was taking away from the game. Number 5. Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster. I said this was a JRPG heavy year, didn't I? Final Fantasy VI is my favourite game of all time. I have played it multiple times throughout my life ever since I was a young boy on multiple different platforms, and I love it more every time I play it. After the initial announcements of the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters were for Steam and mobile only, I was hoping, praying almost for them to be released on consoles, and then I could achieve my goal of having every mainline Final Fantasy Platinum. So, when they were finally released in April 2023, I jumped on them, excited to play through them all again. I started with Final Fantasy VI, although I did play and finish them all back to back in the end, but 6 was the best one. Its incredible story and its large cast of characters were just as great as I remember them being, and Kefka is still my favourite villain in the entire series. The remastered music sounded amazing, and all of the Pixel remasters had a host of helpful additions such as XP boosters or having trackers for the number of chests and hidden items in the area. Almost all of the games in the Pixel Remaster collection have the same trophy list. Earn a certain amount of gil, reach max level, fill the bestiary, find every chest, that sort of thing. but Final Fantasy VI had a few unique ones, like making sure you learn all of Sabin Split's commands, or getting the annoyingly rare Joker's death result with sets of slots. I loved going back to all of the Pixel remasters, and it really reaffirmed my love for this series, but it felt like putting the whole collection on this list was cheating, so I thought I'd just put the best one here instead. Number 4. Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars is a wonderful game. It looks incredible, its story is great, and its combat system is fantastic. It's a nostalgic love letter to the RPGs on the SNES, like Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG, and it does such a great job of invoking the same feelings, but in a modernised package. Sabotage Studios' prequel to The Messenger, and their take on turn-based gameplay, is incredibly fun to get to grips with, and I really enjoyed trying to learn the timings of all the enemy attacks so I could get those perfect guards. I found the way that combat presented itself as a sort of puzzle, with breaking enemy locks by matching elements to interrupt attacks, really interesting, and it kept me engaged throughout the entire journey. Although I have a few misgivings about its lead 3 characters, overall Sea of Stars is easily the best retro RPG I've played, and its story was well told, and its world was gorgeous and some of the best pixel artwork I've ever seen. Its trophy list does a great job of encouraging you to explore the world, but doesn't become too grindy like some of the other games on this list. Also, Sea of Stars has a great minigame called Wheels that I want to play more of. I definitely plan to try out The Messenger this year, and I look forward to the DLC that Sabotage is supposed to be releasing for Sea of Stars. Number 3. Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 was a groundbreaking title when it launched in 2005, and it went on to redefine not only the series it was a part of, but the third-person shooter genre in general, and became one of the most highly regarded games of all time. So when Capcom announced it was going to continue its series of RE makes, I was so excited to go back on Leon S. Kennedy's Spanish Vacation, and boy was I not disappointed. I loved all of the changes that they made to this game. The graphics looked incredible, and I felt that there were wonderful improvements to both Ashley and Luis's characters. They made the island section better, which is now a part of the game that I actually enjoy. Enemies have all had lovely makeovers, and I still hate the Regeneradors and their creepy movements. But most importantly, Ramon Salazar is still a little bitch. Like most Resident Evil titles, the trophy list asks you to play through the game multiple times, but I didn't mind this at all, even for the speedrun trophies, which I usually hate. While perhaps not as groundbreaking as the original, Resi 4 is still a wonderful game to play that would probably have been my favourite game in almost any other year, but 2023 was just that stacked. I honestly have trouble deciding if I prefer the original or the remake more, and that sounds like the perfect remake to me. Number 2. Final Fantasy 16. If this list so far has not made it obvious, I love JRPGs, and the Final Fantasy series is, in my opinion, the best of these. I am a die-hard, by day one, take time off work to play type of fan when a new mainline Final Fantasy game comes out, and Final Fantasy 16 was no exception. I had such a great time with the newest game in this long-running series, although it wasn't without issues. I did find the pacing could be a bit all over the place, especially if you stop to do every side quest the game throws at you. However, most of these side quests weren't interesting to actually do, usually just go here, pick up an item, kill some monsters. However, unlike Cyberpunk or SpiderMan 2, even though the side content could be a bit lackluster, you were always rewarded with a cool story or character moment that made it worth it in the long run. Final Fantasy XVI's main strength is its cast that I really enjoyed. Clive and Jill are one of my favourite couples in the series so far, and Cid is amazing. I love Cid. The story was fun and interesting, and the rotating cast of antagonists that you have to pummel your way through were perfectly melodramatic and over the top, as all good JRPG villains should be. The way that the game ended was something I thought about for a good few weeks after as well. The music in this game is incredible, and I think it's one of Sokken's best works. Compared to previous games in the series, Final Fantasy XVI really mixes up its core gameplay, making it an action RPG instead of a turn-based one, and I know that this is a sore spot for some fans. I really enjoyed this, however, especially on the harder difficulty fights. I just wish there had been more challenging fights. The main story content was actually surprisingly easy. Earning all of the trophies was quite fun to do. There was a good mix of using all of the abilities that the game throws at you through its icons, and doing all the side content that wasn't missable, which is lovely in a 50+ hour game. I will admit, I am biased to the series, and I've stuck with it since I was a kid, but I did come away so happy and impressed with this game, and I look forward to jumping into the DLC that's been released soon. In fact, this game would have been the #1 game on my list, if it wasn't for a game that surprised me with how much that I loved it. Number 1. Lies of P. I love the Dark Souls series. I really like the Souls-like genre as a whole. I adore Bloodborne, and I think it's one of the best games ever made. So I'm presented with a game that seems to love Bloodborne as much as I do, and also seems to get why Bloodborne is so good. What else can I do but love it? Lies of P had my interest as soon as I saw its first trailer, and when I finally got to play it, it clicked almost immediately. Its world building and the atmosphere that seeped into every frame felt like the greatest homage to Bloodborne, and its combat felt like a natural evolution of what Bloodborne was. Its added focus on parrying, similar to Sekiro, and its sometimes frustratingly unpredictable boss attack strings made every single fight feel like victory had to be snatched and earned, and I loved it. Its host of fun weapons and the ability to chop and change the handles and blades to mix up movesets with blade lengths and special attacks meant that there were so many viable playstyles to win with. Everything about Lies of P felt satisfying. Even though the difficulty sometimes frustrated me, it left a huge impression on me, and finally earning the platinum on my New Game Plus run after hours of hitting my head against the final boss felt so good. So that was my list of my favourite platinums that I earned this year. I do have a few honourable mentions for games that I spent a lot of time with but didn't earn all the trophies in for one reason or another. One of these is Baldur's Gate 3, which is amazing and is probably my actual favourite game this year, but I played it on PC, so it's disqualified from this list. I also spent a lot of time playing Final Fantasy XIV this year, finally catching up with the story, ready for Dawn Trail next year. I also spent an inordinate amount of time in the DLCs for Pokemon Violet, mostly shiny hunting, inching closer and closer to owning every shiny Pokemon there is. I think I spent way over 100 hours in each of these 3 games this year. Thanks for watching this video, and please let me know what your favourite platinum or game you finished this year was, and let me know what you're looking forward to in 2024. I know that there are some amazing titles lined up. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or subscribe, and I'll see you all next year.